If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that.
Well, thank you for doing this. I want to just say to the councilwoman, I got you. Don't worry about it. We've already been looking to identify funds to be able to help, one, make sure there's adequate security for Edward Waters College. We are not going to allow these institutions to be targeted by people.
Okay, listen, y'all. Let me tell you, we finna put parties aside, cause it ain't about parties today. A bullet don't know a party, so don't get me started. Okay, Ju'Coby is nice, but Ann is not. Now, if the governor wanted to come here and he bringing gifts to my community, y'all know I'm taking the gifts, because we've been through enough already, and I don't want to go through no more. Now, y'all just be quiet just a minute and let the governor say what he gonna say, and we gonna get this party started. You hear me? Okay, let's do it.
For 40 years now, Dr. Claude Anderson has been talking about inappropriate behavior in the black community. Now, when he talks about that, what he refers to is black people reacting to racism in a way that either fails to fight it, or worse, in a way that encourages it. One of, if not the worst way to respond to anti-black racism is to show weakness in the face of anti-black violence, to show weakness in the face of racists. Ron DeSantis is a card-carrying anti-black racist, and he has been for a very long time. The race mass murder in Jacksonville a few days ago was the direct result of the constant anti-black rhetoric and posturing that he's been doing since he became governor. In fact, he was very popular with neo-Nazis before he became governor. He has made it the hallmark of his time as a politician to wage a non-stop war on black people, declaring that black history, black voters, and black citizens are the enemy that he's at war with. With sick glee, he signed laws legalizing harming black people merely for demonstrating. He has also attacked the black community in Florida through the targeted deprivation of state funds, which, by the way, are the black community's own tax dollars that they are being denied. See, in Florida, the governor has the ability to do a line-item veto. That means that when the state legislature presents him with the annual budget, he can arbitrarily cross off things that he doesn't like. Those things that he chooses to cross off just won't get funded, which is exactly what he's done for everything relating to black people in Florida. And that brings us to Ju'Coby Pittman, aka Mammy Pittman. She was licking DeSantis' boots to a mirror shine. This ridiculous-looking ghoul, in the hour of grief for this community, she came out there berating black people and telling them that a bullet has no political party. Actually, it does. The Republicans have literally been the party of the gun lobby. In response to the Parkland school massacre, DeSantis and his pals passed a raft of laws to make it easier for white supremacists to get their hands on guns and to not be stopped for any reason. The Republican Party are literally the political party of firearms. It's no coincidence that the vast majority of mass shooters are right-wingers, or at the very least, right-wing adjacent. So bullets do have a political party, the Republican Party, and in Florida, white supremacists have a political leader, Ron DeSantis. This piece of walking filth had the nerve to smile and preen and strut and say that I'm going to accept these gifts if he's bringing them. I want them because we suffered too much. She, of course, doesn't mention that the entire reason that black people have suffered in her district is because of Ron DeSantis. This is a sellout Bootlick auditioning heavy for a job from white power. She wants to be in the good graces of the same white money forces that are backing DeSantis. She's hoping that there's a couple of pennies, or rather crumbs, for her. That's what you saw her doing. Bootlicks will do anything to get a pat on their empty little heads. But for me, the topper was when Mammy Pittman said at the very end of her bootlicking speech that, "We're gonna get this party started." This was a prayer vigil, not a damn block party. For her to even say those words showed how little respect she had for the murder victims. What, a bunch of dead bodies over there? And some white supremacists who did it? Well, let's go ahead and break out the music and let's show ourselves some dance moves. That's all the black folks in Florida are about. To hear her tell it, she presented the black community in Florida to the world as nothing more than targets to be killed. And that afterwards, black people in Florida apparently will allow the very racist puke who orchestrated the violence against them to come among them, and they will respectfully listen to him as if he had done nothing wrong. Let him spout out his talking points and then walk away as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't done anything. No matter how racist you are against the black community, apparently they will just bite their tongues and sit on their hands while the very racists who cheerlead and encourage and legislate violence against the black community walk right up in their faces and say, I didn't have anything to do with this. First of all, DeSantis is the entire reason the black community in Florida has been so deprived of resources. He's a racist who has been using his position as governor to specifically target and deny the black community its own tax dollars. The economic deprivation of black Florida has been government policy directly from Ron DeSantis' office. Secondly, if you think this racist bastard's actually going to do anything for the black community anywhere, then you're a fool. DeSantis knew that everyone was going to blame him for this mass murder because he's been openly demonizing the black community for years, and he's been using his platform as governor to attack black Floridians every second of every day he's been in office. So he figured he had to come down and try to manufacture a PR moment for himself. He knew everybody was going to be looking at him and saying, yeah, DeSantis, you're the reason this happened. So he would say a few completely insincere words and then bounce, which is exactly what he did. Now, there's something else about this Ju'Coby Pittman woman. She is not the leader of the black community. She's just some Democrat shill in the city council office. None of these bootlicks are the black community's leaders. Black people are supposed to be the leaders. At least we're supposed to be. But it's way past time we started acting like it. We are the ones who are supposed to be in charge. And when we speak, people like Ju'Coby Pittman are supposed to be the ones who fall silent. How dare she call herself telling the people in their hour of grief to be quiet? This is the tail wagging the dog. Those people are supposed to be her constituents. Constituents meaning she takes orders from them, not the other way around. If they're booing DeSantis, she's supposed to be out there booing them too, or at the very least backing them up. Because they're the ones who put her in office. They're the ones who she's supposed to be taking orders from. Shouldn't she be worried that if she disrespects or otherwise disagrees with her constituents, that the crowd is going to turn on her? But she wasn't. Because when a group's internal politics have become deranged and confused, it will be hard for them to focus on getting rid of problem candidates and more difficult for them to focus on it long term. These bootlick politicians count on that. The people who just stood there letting her berate them and stood there letting her praise DeSantis, that was a disgrace. And the ones who sat there silently, which was most of them, they should be ashamed. And I said it. Our enemies in the white media will take that silence from that group as proof that they were just acting rowdy because DeSantis is a Republican. Why, look how quickly they fell silent when a Democrat mammy told them to. That's the spin the white media is going to put on it. And to all intents and purposes, they might as well be right. Now, I don't mean to attack the community down there. They've been through enough. I'm not blaming them for the massacre. It's DeSantis' fault. They did the right thing by booing that bastard. Truth be told, that was the bare minimum they could do. But, and it needs to be said, if at this late date in the 21st century, if black people cannot be fearless in the face of a race massacre, if they cannot stand up to the white supremacists and their bootlicks to their faces, then when are black people going to do it? A large part of why slavery, Jim Crow, and the race massacres happened and why we never get justice is because we allow bootlicks like Ju'Coby Pittman to be among us, to keep undermining us. When the victims of anti-black violence are faced with the racist who called for, promoted, and encouraged that violence, and they show him any kind of respect, that is a people who will never be respected and who will never be allowed to simply live their lives. People will see that, and their only takeaway from it will be, well, it can't be that serious. Why, look at how these black folks reacted. They just fell quiet so quickly, so obviously there was nothing to it. Ju'Coby Pittman consciously and deliberately helped to give the white media material with which to push an anti-black counter-narrative. But my problem is also that you had Negroes just standing there, standing around while this was happening. And yes, I'm afraid that falls on them. Too many of us are concerned only with not being criticized for making black folks look bad. But the problem is, let the white media and their bootlicks tell it everything makes black people look bad. And now it's gotten to the point that we will let people berate us for booing an accomplice in black murder. And we'll fall silent like a scolded child. Worse than that, too many of us will go right along with things that we know to be a pack of lies. Black people simply cannot afford to be silent when these bootlicks are being apologists for the murder of black people. And if you think that it was some kind of coincidence that she was there, if you think that DeSantis hadn't already planned out in advance that she would be his crash dummy if the crowd was hostile, then you don't know how politics actually works. I think it was already prearranged that Mammy Pittman would be DeSantis' human shield if the crowd was hostile. By the way, Democrats and Republicans do this all the time. That's why they always seem to have some bootlick close to them whenever they're dealing with the black community, especially if something controversial's gone down. They always do that. I think that the reason she was standing right there beside the mic is exactly because they had arranged that she was going to do that in case things went sour. Ron DeSantis knows full well that Black Florida hates him because he hates black people. So of course he would have arranged beforehand to have this bottle blonde bootlick run interference for him if the crowd didn't stop booing him. This is something that both Democrats and Republicans do. They have black shills who are on their payroll who are always right on hand to calm black folks down. Doesn't matter if it's Ron DeSantis or Joe Biden. They always make sure to have some Simone Mammy Sanders or Kamala Harris or whomever on hand, some pet Negro who they know is going to be barking at the black community. My problem, though, is that the black attendees to that vigil did what this traitor told them to do. They should have become louder and rowdier when she started talking back to them. That they were cowed so easily made the tragedy worse because the dead have been silenced and the living refuse to say a word on their behalf. One of my commenters on Twitter said that the black community is dead, that it died during slavery. I know it's a bitter pill to swallow, but he's right. Our willingness to fight, our refusal to tolerate disrespect was largely beaten out of us. When something wrong slaps you in the face, you're supposed to fight it. We are all supposed to be able to recognize evil when we see it, and we're supposed to be driven to fight it and to crush it, but we're not. Instead, we try to rationalize it. We are so quick to hide behind Bible verses too, but only the ones that justify us not fighting. We ignore the ones that tell us to fight. We say some empty rhetoric about turning the other cheek, when in reality we're cowards, just trying to find a way to make our cowardice and apathy sound like a virtue, when it's not. We want our refusal to stand up for our faith and for ourselves to sound pious, when the truth is, it's just plain old cowardice, plain old spiritual laziness. We're scared to stand up for anything, and we can't be bothered to fight, especially for ourselves. The sad truth is that too many of us are waiting for white power to give us permission to speak up for ourselves, or to give us permission to talk back to these anti-black racists. And we're scared if we even think that they're not going to give us that permission. We're terrified of even the slightest criticism from them. The second that we receive any pushback from the white media or their bootlicks, we back down. We're terrified at the prospect of criticism from white power, especially their media. We're terrified some bootlick or some empty-headed Negro or some old baby boomer or some hood rat or dusty dude's gonna say, "Mans, days is making us look horrible. Oh, why's black folks always got to be so unruly in Publix?" That's what we're scared of. We rein ourselves in when we're supposed to be cutting loose. The enemy knows that, and they play on that weakness. And they have a number of operatives among us who encourage this subservient behavior. Decades of white power sending a torrent of bootlicks and traitors to pose as our leaders has confused and deranged our internal politics to the point that we allow people to berate us publicly because we're angry at some racist governor who encourages anti-black massacres. We allow ourselves to be berated for our righteous indignation at the fact that we're being murdered with impunity, and these are not just mass murders, they are executions carried out by the state. We are drowned in liars and self-interested con men sent by white power, and who they tell us this is who we're supposed to vote for. Well, these are not our leaders. We didn't choose them. What Ju'Coby Pittman did is what all the bootlicks, tethers, and white adjacents have done for over a century. If they can't be classified as white, then at the very least they'll do the most to make themselves of use to those who are. And it happens because all too often we have allowed it. So yes, whether you want to hear it or not, the black community is dead. But that's the reason we're here. That's the reason we're doing what we're doing. The black community is dead. And it is up to us to resurrect it. Now, some of you may hate this analogy, but I'm going to say it anyway. When Jesus Christ was crucified and put to death, he too was also dead. He wasn't asleep or just in a coma. He wasn't just incapacitated. He was dead. No heartbeat, no brain waves. His spirit had been separated from his body, which is what death is. But in order for the world to change, he had to be resurrected. The black community is also dead, and it too must also be resurrected if justice is to prevail. What we saw in Florida was a hideous example of how easily some Negroes can be gotten off code, not just from Mammy Pittman, but also from the black people who fell silent simply because this sock puppet punk Pittman began yelling her stupid head off. She scolded them like children and they obeyed. That's not the behavior of people who are spiritually and morally alive. That is the behavior of a people who are spiritually, intellectually, and morally dead. You had black people there who knew better, but didn't do anything. They just obeyed. It was an example of moral cowardice. It was an example of spiritual death. And we have to call it what it is. You got black folks who are cowed and at this point cowardly. And what are they scared of? They're trying to win some respectability politics, which is what causes people who are righteously outraged to fall silent like they did. Well, first of all, the people who elected garbage like Bunny Ruckus to office in the first place, they're the ones who should be ashamed. Yes, she looked different in her past photos, by the way. She didn't have that bleached blonde garbage on her head, but so what? She didn't just become a bootlick when DeSantis came to town on Sunday. She had been auditioning for butter biscuits long before that. This was a vigil for the victims of a mass murder that was inspired and encouraged by Ron DeSantis. One of the people there should have taken the mic and told the world that he was responsible for this. In Minneapolis, after the murder of George Floyd, the city's so-called progressive mayor called himself doing what DeSantis did. He decided he would have a little town hall in the middle of town and tell the people that they shouldn't be blaming him. The people of Minneapolis, though, weren't having it. They publicly excoriated that bastard, and they literally drove him out of the town square. And then after that, he stopped all of his splaining, and he began acting, or at least talking, like he had some sense, for a while there anyway. Now, the mayor of Minneapolis was marginally responsible for the murder of George Floyd. DeSantis, on the other hand, is completely responsible for the mass murder in Jacksonville. That was one of his supporters who did it, and they did it at his political behest. He spent years repeating white supremacist talking points and encouraging violence against the black community by literally running against black Florida and signing laws explicitly for the purpose of legalizing violence against black people. He spent years setting up all of the rhetorical and legislative dominoes necessary to lead to white supremacists taking out acts of open violence against the black community. All he had to do at that point was sit back and wait for someone to knock him over, and it didn't take long. We cannot afford to be silent in the face of injustice. Too many Negroes, even at this late date, are still trying to win some respectability contest. These white supremacists will never respect you, and even if they did, what does that mean to you? The goal is to make the white supremacists retreat from the public square, and you don't do that by being on your best behavior for the cameras. You can't get these born-again Nazis to back down by showing them that you're not going to resist them. The white supremacists are violent thugs. The only thing they understand is getting a foot in their behinds. So that being the case, you're supposed to put on the size 10 gunboats with the steel toe and start swinging. As Paul Mooney said, when they go crazy, you're supposed to go crazy too. Now, there's another aspect to this that has to be mentioned. It was no accident at all that when DeSantis was being confronted by the community, it happened to be a black woman who was the one who rushed to the lectern, took the mic, and began berating the crowd. We have seen this time and time again. All too often when a white supremacist is getting checked, it will be some Bunny Ruckus wannabe who's tripping over her hair weave to be the first one to protect him and to tell the community to stop fighting white supremacy. They want to be the very first ones to wag their finger at the community. You had a bunch of people out there, including black women, who were furious, indignant, and who were on code against DeSantis. But family, we have to be honest about how white power has worked to drive a gender divide and how they have effectively played on it. Over the course of the last several years, we've seen a lot of black male bootlicks, usually preachers, though sometimes politicians, who white powers tried to trot out there to get them to toe the line for massa. And practically all of them get called out and shouted down. It's to the point now where they don't even try it publicly anymore. They'll do it on TV, but that's about it. Their black male bootlicks have found that when they try to come out here and wag their finger at the community, it blows up in their faces. But when they send out a black woman to do it, people don't react that way. We have to be uncompromising about leaving the enemy no one to hide behind. Now, sisters, this is where you come in. Black women are on code, and more are getting on code every day. That's why I'm saying this. The best way to shut down the Ju'Coby Pittmans is to have black women who are the ones doing it. There were black women there, but they were silent. You don't have to ask permission to shut down a bootlick who's undermining us. Everyone fell silent because they were waiting to see who else was going to say something, but no one did. This is what I mean when I say white power deranges and confuses our internal politics. What should be easy and automatic for us instead becomes disorganized, confused, and ultimately impossible. They send their operatives among us precisely to undermine us like this. Notice how nobody in the white media is calling Ju'Coby Pittman out because she was doing their bidding. The enemy has become highly reliant on using female bootlicks to sell the soap for them. Black women in particular have a huge part to play in challenging these bootlicks and doing so forcefully. When the enemy sees that black women aren't going to be silent and aren't having it, then the same way we've seen the black male bootlicks largely abandon speaking in public, we'll also see the Ju'Coby Pittmans do the same. We, all of us, are the leaders of the black community, not these hand-picked puppets. When they call themselves talking back to us, they are out of order, not us. When we are confronting evil and they take the side of evil, then they are not public servants anymore. They have become public enemies. When we are voicing our outrage, nobody has the right to tell us to be quiet, especially not some punk we put in office. We are the leaders, but we have to act like it. When some bootlick berates us, we're supposed to shout them down and run them out. And when that happens, we will be the ones who control the mic, and we will be the ones making sure that the truth is told. Which is as it should be. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Keith Baker, Starlet Thompson, Morris Bodden, Alan Reese, and Tajuddin Aleem. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.